Chapter 18, Long and Short-Term Solutions. Abdu'l-Baha repeatedly praised one of the early American Baha'is, Juliet Thompson, for her absolute truthfulness. Abdu'l-Baha had told Juliet, quote, "You are nearer to me than anyone here, because you have told me the truth." Abdu'l-Baha prophesied of her that, quote, "In the time to come, queens will wish they had been the maid of Juliet." In the long term, humanity must cultivate the necessary changes in culture that will enable future generations to behave truthfully and to more easily pursue and discover truth in the world. Baha'u'llah said, quote, "Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues." This advancement, this change in culture might take centuries, but there is no way around it. A society that possesses admirable laws on paper can nevertheless lose its way when vice creeps in to undermine legal structures and processes. What is needed is virtuous thought and action expected and adopted by society, ingrained in culture. This type of society based on virtue upholds law. Conversely, a society where individuals are motivated by personal advantage will eventually be subverted by laws that have been neutered or corrupted. Abdu'l-Baha said, quote, "Love is the foundation of economics." I think one meaning of this is that the spiritual or ethical must guide over and influence the material if we are to arrange things in the correct manner. Because economic systems are influenced by incentives. The method that helps all people, rather than just one group or another, is to base development on ethics, on spiritual principle. In the end, the long-term improvement of the world might depend heavily on cultural changes brought about by the cooperation of the people at the grassroots level of society. The current systems of governance might not be able to disentangle themselves from the forces of corruption that have always assailed them. Baha'u'llah appears to foresee something like this. He says, quote, "After a time, all the governments on earth will change. Oppression will envelop the world. And following a universal convulsion, the sun of justice will rise from the horizon of the unseen realm." How does the Baha'i Faith promote cultural change? One of the main ways is an emphasis on spiritual growth, cultivation of character and virtue. What are some ways through which this happens? Personal spiritual habits of prayer, meditation, reflection on ideals, virtuous behavior, promoting harmonious cooperation and reciprocity between the individual, the community, and the institutions of society, personal teaching and service efforts to benefit others, a worldwide participatory process of learning in each locality, focused on the development of positive habits and patterns and systems, and an open invitation to all people to contribute to this process with the intention of positively impacting the growth and development of society. Abdu'l-Baha said to some friends in Haifa in June 1919, quote, "Not until the cause of universal peace becomes a personal religious conviction will it prove to be permanent. Diplomacy is impotent. The all-powerful Word of God must establish it and make it a living, potent, and lasting factor in the world. Hearts must be purified, and no trace of revenge, enmity, and rancor must linger in any heart until peace shall prove to be permanent." In another place, Abdu'l-Baha wrote, quote, "There have issued from his mighty pen various teachings for the prevention of war, and these have been scattered far and wide. The first is the independent investigation of truth, for blind imitation of the past will stunt the mind. But once every soul inquireth into truth, society will be freed from the darkness of continually repeating the past. His second principle is the oneness of mankind, that all men are the sheep of God, and God is their loving shepherd, caring most tenderly for all without favoring one or another. His third teaching is that religion is a mighty stronghold, but that it must engender love, not malevolence and hate. Should it lead to malice, spite, and hate, it is of no value at all. For religion is a remedy, and if the remedy bring on disease, then put it aside. Again, as to religious, racial, national, and political bias, all these prejudices strike at the very root of human life. One and all, they beget bloodshed and the ruination of the world. So long as these prejudices survive, there will be continuous and fearsome wars." Unquote. As important as these processes of cultural change and advancement are, it is clear that they unfold gradually and take a long time to bear fruit. Decades, perhaps centuries. Is there something we can do in the short term to improve our pursuit of truth? Throughout this presentation, I have tried to emphasize how our behavior and outlook are highly influenced by our thoughts, which in turn are greatly affected by the information that is available to us. In the short term, starting even today, something that is vital for all of us to do immediately is to look critically at our sources of information and make any changes that we deem necessary. I have noticed that to get a good perspective on current events, I have to pay attention to the work of independent journalists that operate outside the typical news organizations, because those traditional organizations are dependent on government funding or corporate money, which negatively impacts their reporting. First, here are sources that I would be very cautious of in the USA. Any major newspaper, National Public Radio, any network or cable news source, whether you get it on your television or your computer or other electronic device. I'm talking about CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, and so on. News wire services such as Reuters and the Associated Press. If you want your journalism to be independent from conflicts of interest, steer away from the above news outlets. They are riddled with conflicts of interest. For instance, the Associated Press recently took $52 million from USAID, and Reuters was paid by USAID to engage in, quote, large-scale social deception, unquote. I kid you not. It's right there in the contract summary. Of course, other countries also have their tainted platforms to contend with, such as CBC in Canada, BBC in the UK, or ABC in Australia, and so on. In 2025, here is a partial list of what I regard to be more trustworthy and reliable journalists. They might have their shortcomings and limits and disagree with each other about certain subjects, but don't we all? The point here is I have found that these sources have a track record of attempting to pursue truth, are transparent in their reporting. They admit when they have reported something inaccurately, and are not trying to persuade you of a specific viewpoint based on hidden agendas. The list. Racket News, Matt Taibbi. System Update, Glenn Greenwald. Public News, Michael Schellenberger. Full Measure News, Cheryl Atkeson. The Dark Horse Podcast with Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying. Jeffrey Jackson, The Highwire, at Jackson Report. The Unbiased Podcast. Jordan, the host, goes by the Twitter handle at Jordan is my lawyer. Lawyer is spelled without the E. I also turn often to various Substack accounts and to the Twitter X platform in order to access facts and unvarnished perspectives that allow for more faithful pursuit of truth as compared to traditional sources or other social media platforms. If you are still relying primarily on Google for internet search, even after hearing Chapter 6 of this presentation, I hope you understand its limits and disadvantages. Safari and DuckDuckGo are not much better, I think. If you are searching the internet, you might want to use Brave or Quant, that's Qwant, and Yandex, Yandex, or at least compare search results on these platforms to what you normally use, because just about all of the other well-known search engines are compromised.